Hello and welcome back, and today I want to compare mesh routers once again. I'm looking at the TP-Link Deco, the M5, which you can get 3 of these in a multi-pack for just 180 quid, making it one of the most affordable mesh routers out there. And I'm going to compare this bad boy against my personal favourite, the Synology mesh system. Now this a lot more expensive. This is 120 to 130 pounds for just one mesh point. So once again, if you're going to have 3 of these, you are already looking at about 360 to 390 pounds to kit yourself out with 3 of these bad boys. So straight away, we're already seeing that if price is the most important thing to you, you've already made your decision. You've already decided on the Deco. But there is so much more to it, and there's a reason why this frankly more expensive mesh system is my personal favourite, not just because it's from a NAS brand. But before we go down that road, let's do a very quick introduction about mesh routers. I'll try and get this knocked out in about a minute. So, why should a person buy a mesh router? Well, there's a couple of good reasons. One, because buildings, even older buildings, Wi-Fi has a lot of difficulty covering both larger areas and getting through with any sufficient strength thicker and thicker walls. So in home and businesses, meshes have become a very attractive idea. They are the ability to have several mesh points detailed around a building or a home or office environment that communicate with one another and at the same time give you wireless access to a network and the internet. And as you walk through a surrounding area with your mobile phone, your tablet, your whatever, your device will only see one Wi-Fi network, but technically you are communicating with multiple mesh points as you walk from one end of the building to the other. Of course, people in the past have used things like power line adapters to run another Wi-Fi spot at the other end of the house, maybe with a wireless power line adapter or another router. But by doing that, even if you clone the Wi-Fi network with the same name, the SSID, security protocol and more, if you're walking through your house or building and you're connected to one point, one router at one end of your house, even if you are next to another router at the other end of your house, there's no guaranteeing that your device will hop onto that, and in many cases it will continue to connect to the slower, more distant device because it hasn't severed the connection. It doesn't know to go to another point. Meshes resolve that by one giant area of coverage made up by multiple antenna points, means your device will just hook onto the nearest antenna in the same way it might have hooked onto different antennas on a single router. Now I think I did 2 minutes there, not a minute and a half, but I hope that explains about mesh routers and why they're so important. Now, these devices here, that you've got to judge them as more than their price. Now I've already done software tutorials, setup guides and hardware and software guides, so this comparison video is going to be kind of relying on the fact that you've watched that content. So I'm going to go into some detail but not loads. I strongly recommend you check out those videos before watching this, and I'll try and feature some content throughout this video as well. But in terms of hardware, the Synology is the greater of the two. They've both got a quad-core internal CPU, and they've both got half a gig, 512 megabytes of memory, along with 4 gig of flash memory too. So the same internal hardware with regards to CPU. It's a Qualcomm ARM based CPU in both of them for that network handling. But there are a few other ways in terms of hardware where there's an enormous disparity. So in the TP-Link, if we bring it up to the camera, it's very small indeed. I mean, to put that into perspective, that is the size difference between them if I lay one on top of the other. The TP-Link is a lot smaller. It's taller, but in terms of where it is in size, it is much smaller indeed. And in your home, where it sits, the colour might make a vast amount of difference. It's worth mentioning that these are only available in white and these are only available in black. The black has a stand. It's not wall mountable, unfortunately, not in any direct sense, whereas this can be wall mounted on those little hooks that you can buy. They're dirt cheap, or of course laid out hidden on a bookshelf somewhere. But in terms of hardware, the main disparity is this has got ventilation built into the bottom of the device, and we have 2 LAN ports built there into the rear. We've got either one can be used as WAN and the other one as LAN, or both used as LAN. In fact, I've got another one of the devices being used right now for my previous speed test video, where I'm using it as a wireless access point, and I'm using the WAN for my internet connectivity. But apart from that, and apart from power, that's all you've got. You don't have a WPS button for smart, easy one-touch connectivity with WPS devices. That's a button where you can sync two devices up easily on the same network. But WPS is available on the app that we'll talk about later on. There's no USB ports because you can't really exchange files and data on this device. It is just for network connectivity only. Now, the Synology has 2 LAN as well on the rear, but it's also got USB, and you can connect an external drive to this device and thereby make those files network accessible to all the surrounding devices. And FileStation also supports, via the Synology router management software, DLNA support of the USB port, which means you can make an external USB drive network accessible and and access files on your DLNA devices, your laptops, your phones, your TVs, your Xboxes, your whatever. And although I'm not going to call this a NAS system, even though it's from a NAS brand, I will say there is network file access with Synology's file management software available on the device itself in desktop applications and mobile applications too. Indeed, in terms of antennas, both of them have got two internal antennas for communicating with other mesh systems. But the Synology is the only one that's got that backhaul that runs as a means of creating a very solid and rugged, dare I say, connection between mesh points that this device just doesn't feature beyond the normal mesh connectivity between them. Additionally, the Synology supports WPA 2 and 3, the more the safer, more encrypted protocol of network connectivity. This only goes as high as WPA 2. And just generally, the hardware device and that WPS button there as well for connecting to WPS devices means that in terms of hardware, you've got to give it to the Synology. Don't get me wrong, you're clearly paying more. I mean, at 180 nicker, that means these are only costing you 60 quid each, and that costs 120 to 130. So that the Synology is twice as expensive. Sorry to bring it back round to price. So you would expect it to have better hardware, and I'm pleased to confirm that it does. But moving beyond that, let's talk about software, because both of these two devices are actually really good for software. They've both got a couple of little downfalls that I'll talk about, but they're really, really good pieces of software for completely different reasons. And I think for a number of you, if price isn't the killer factor, this software will be. Because the TP-Link software is only available, I'll go through the negatives first, just to knock them out of the way. The TP-Link software is only available on mobile phones, iOS and Android devices, and if you don't have one of those two, you can't configure it with a desktop PC or Mac system. Secondly, the software itself is incredibly user-friendly, which is great, but techie guys are going to hate using a mobile phone to configure these devices, because in a business environment or when you've got multiple users, they don't really want to have to use their mobile phones, do they? I mean, when you're at work, if you work, whether you're a shelf stacker in Sainsbury's or, data admin or whatever, you don't want to have to use your mobile phone to do core work for the building and the surrounding network. But in terms of the software, my other big problem with the software that I mentioned in the setup guide is you have to register an account with TP-Link when setting this up the first time. You can't get into the configuration of that application until you've registered an account online. And two things. One, I don't like that. People don't want to be forced to create an email, an account, and give them some information to create an account with TP-Link. You've paid your price. I want my hardware. But the second thing is, you need to have an internet connection to register an account. And you might not have a working wireless internet connection for your mobile phone. You might not have a data plan or run out of data, so you won't be able to set this device up without an internet connection. But it's an internet enabling Wi-Fi device. And you know what I mean? I really didn't like that factor about it. And although you set it up with Bluetooth, that was still really, really off-putting. But moving forward from that, the software is incredibly user-friendly. It's very, very simplistic for those that don't have a lot of network experience, and it even manages the near impossible to make the technical, more advanced options still chewable and user-friendly. Despite this, I still don't think it's for me. It's for people that are putting their tippy toes into network environments, storage or otherwise. But it was still great to use that software, and they did manage to find a very good line between complexity and utility, and I mentioned that several times in that video. Now, the Synology software Different kettle of fish. The Synology software, Synology Router Management, is an entire operating system. It is incredible. But, starting with the negatives, it can be very daunting and intimidating for a number of users. You can set it up with a mobile-only app if you choose, and there is a desktop option available as well. So you've got those options open to you. But it does require the tiniest pinch more of a learning curve than the likes of the TP-Link device. That said, it does so much more. You've got access to that Google Safe Search. You've got access to user client creation, this business with Synology software of having a list of all the connected devices and then assigning them to a new user. That user can have their own login, that user can have their photo, everything on there, and you can list all these devices that belong to that person and give that one person, for example, 3 hours of internet connectivity a day. So say you've got a son or a daughter or a relative in the house and they've got work to do, college or more, you can give that user 3 hours of internet access every day that's spread across all of those devices. And it doesn't matter which device they use and how they use it. When that time is up, that time is up. You can white and blacklist certain websites or bulk whitelist and blacklist them thanks to the Google Safe Search and Google Family Wi-Fi software that and algorithms they've shared with Synology. Very few of the brands have access to this, and some brands that do charge you for it. I'm looking at you, Velop from Linksys. But on top of that, the network configuration and the network access and control is just so much better on the Synology application. And I can't stress enough that business of creating a much more dynamic control area of the connections in your environment that appeals to both home and business users. And it's kind of the main reason I do love it. I know you guys think I've got a real hard on for this, but it is a great bit of software and I recommend you check it out. I don't think you can get a demo for it, but check out my Synology Router Manager SRM 1.2 software overview that should be live by now. But in terms of software for me, I'm definitely going to say as an IT enthusiast, the Synology is better, and it's kind of where the bulk of the money went in this. Now, while we're on the subject of configurable devices and hardware, it's worth factoring 2 more things into your decision. 1, the network coverage and top speed, overall you get is greater on the Synology. The TP-Link is an AC 1300 device, which means it can cover a maximum of 1,300 megabits per second speed, but this is spread across a 2.4 gigahertz bandwidth and a 5 gigahertz bandwidth. So that's 400 and I think 870 something megabits per second respectively. But you can't have one device utilize both in any real sense. So you have to bear that in mind, that with that, that speed obviously depreciates the greater the distance you go. And to make up those shortfalls, you're going to need more Deco Wi-Fi points over your network. Whereas the Synology rates an AC 2200, that's 2200 megabits, spread across twin 5 gigahertz networks and a single 2.5 gigahertz bandwidth. So again, a much greater density of coverage, which means you'll need fewer of these devices, which may cost up to twice as much as each one of these, but with a much grander coverage area. Chances are you're going to need less of these in your network than you would of these anyway. It's also worth mentioning that with the Deco system, you will have to have another router or modem to connect this to have the extra LAN ports for things in your home like PCs and TVs, stuff that isn't wireless. On top of that, even more so, the idea that that original Wi-Fi point that you connect to, be it the router from your internet service provider or one that you've purchased previously, you'll have to deactivate that Wi-Fi because you can't have both Wi-Fis running at the same time. Your devices will get confused and they'll interrupt one another. So you need to deactivate the Wi-Fi on your internet service provider router and use this only, which means you now have to have one of these next to your main router. So you kind of lose a Deco there straight away. And that's going to be the case no matter which one of these devices you use. But Synology also sells the RT2600, which is their own large end router device. And it's about 200 odd nicked, don't get me wrong, but it's got 4 LAN ports. It has USB supported storage on it. It has a dual-core 1.7 gigahertz ARM CPU inside. It's got an SD card reader. It's got everything going on. But the most important point is this can mesh with this. It doesn't have to connect via LAN, which means this 2600 megabits per second multi-frequency coverage Wi-Fi router will cover an enormous area with its 4 aerials. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you can have just 1 or 2 mesh points in another area of your house. In fact, that device and just one of these almost covers the entire area that this can cover in the right scenario, which means the prices now meet a little bit more in the middle. Don't get me wrong, you're still spending a hell of a lot of money more on the Synology, by upwards of 30 to 50% more. But the coverage will be greater. You won't have to have the mains power points needed that these do, because every one of these needs mains power plugged into a wall socket. And on top of that, you've got the great software and coverage options, and you can move and configure these aerial points and create individual networks as well within your network. These are software options that the Deco just doesn't give you, and it shouldn't at such a low price of 180 quid for a fairly, well laid mesh network. So again, I'm going to go right back to the beginning of this video and focus on those points. If affordability is key, if money is tight, your budget is tight, and your wallet is coughing up blood, then chances are the Deco is the right one for you. Because to be honest, if you want mesh, you're not going to get it cheaper than this. But if the budget isn't the deciding factor for you, in every other regard, the Synology mesh system is still better. We've still got a couple more of these mesh routers to go, and I'm looking forward to see how the Synology compares with Google Wi-Fi, their very own Wi-Fi system. But right now, I strongly recommend the Synology Wi-Fi system because it's just better on a software, hardware level overall. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video.